Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
In our third episode of the series, Conflict and Empathy, Where Has Empathy and Compassion Gone? Edwin Rutsch and I will continue our conversation on how we build a culture of empathy with a particular emphasis on nurturing a culture of empathy in the family. Edwin will share some of his personal stories of how he has fostered empathy in his extended family and how he used restorative empathy circles to heal family conflicts. Now, Edwin has joined me for the month of June in this series, and again, he is our returning guest and founding director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy. The cultureofempathy.com is the largest website on the Internet focused on nurturing and fostering empathy. After spending 10 years as a seeker, traveling, working, and studying his way around the world, Edwin worked for many years in the computer technology field. And since discovering the power of empathy, he has dedicated his life to raising the level of empathy in society and building a global culture of empathy. We are taking live callers. We encourage you to call in 347-324-3591. And we also have a chat room open. And if you'd like to post your comments or questions there, just simply go to blogtalkradio.com/Texas-conflict-coach and just scroll down the page. You'll see the chat room is open. Or simply even Twitter me a message at TX Conflict Coach. We welcome those comments and questions. So, Edwin, welcome back for our third episode.
Oh, it's so good to be back with you, Patty. Just really enjoying these conversations so much.
Oh, I have as well. There's so much that, can be talked about regarding, empathy and compassion. We've had not only fun, but, it's just been really, enlightening and so much education and materials and ways to get involved, on your website. And in fact, what I've loved about doing this is being experiential and doing a video on Google Hangouts. And so listeners, you may not know, but one of the episodes this month is a video component, and just simply go to TexasConflictCoach.com or cultureofempathy.com, and you can see the video there. And in fact, next week, which is our last episode, we'll also have a video, so something fun and different on the Texas Conflict Coach. Where we left off last time, Edwin, was how do we go about building a culture of empathy? And one of your assignments, for listeners, was to kind of look at the blueprint, if you will, on your site. And there are many, many, many strategies listed. And so I guess what I'd like to ask of you, of those many that are listed, which ones would you like to highlight right now?
Well, on that list was actually created out of my perhaps 200 interviews that I've done, with empathy experts in all kinds of fields, academic, science, education, the arts, you name it. And I always ask them, well, tell me, how can we build a culture of empathy? And the one area that I've been looking at myself has been intention. Is that to build a culture of empathy, to foster empathy, in our own lives, is we need that intention to do it. And how do we get that intention? Why is it that we want to do it? Why do we want to commit, or why do I want to commit to doing empathy in my own life, fostering it? So it's that one topic area of intention is kind of what I think is really important, at least for myself at the moment.
Okay, great. One of the ones, if I may share, that was really standing out for me on this was about filling your empathy batteries. Because we talked about that. What is your empathy battery full, or is it on the dimmer switch? Low on the dimmer switch or high on the dimmer switch, and what was appealing to me is that so oftentimes it's that self-empathy. That was one of those spokes on your wheel of empathy, that if it's hard to be empathetic even toward ourselves and compassionate and forgiving of ourselves, how difficult is it to practice it for other people? And so where does it begin? And so a lot of times, that's one of the things that resonated with me on that strategy. But there's so many that you have.
So it's really that quality of it's that quality of filling up your own empathy battery that really resonates with you, is what I'm hearing.
Oh, absolutely, and for you creating that intention, because if you don't have that intention, that conscious intention, of not only how are we going to build it, but how do we get that intention? You had a number of really great questions, like how, why would we want to go further? How does it look like? How does it feel? And what is that intention, purposeful intention? And I think so much of it ties together. So anything else that you wanted to highlight about that?
With that battery, I think that you really hit an interesting point there. Is I've done workshops or been in situations where I've gotten a lot of empathy, where people have really heard me, where I felt really nurtured and really heard. And I can feel myself calm down, kind of feel more spacious, feel more loving, more open. And, it's a state which is like really, a beautiful state. But then you leave the workshop, you leave the class, you go out into the world, and slowly, those judgments and, those put downs, the demeaning or the quality of not being heard, start affecting me. And then slowly, step by step, I feel, that empathic charge inside myself kind of shrink, and that space within myself shrink slowly until, I'm totally tense and uptight again, because the world has kind of had that effect on me. So, what I find really helpful is to have ongoing empathy support, these empathy circles, which we talked about previously, that it's not like something, it's just kind of like that same metaphor as the muscle. That, you can do a workout a little bit and kind of, charge up your physical, bodily muscles and battery. But then it's the same thing. You got to go and you have to do it on an ongoing basis. It's not like take a workshop, watch a video, read a book. It's like an ongoing practice to keep charging and replenishing that battery. And and that really comes from being heard yourself, that you can share and be heard by others.
I love what you say about that, because it's that, I think it goes back to what you were saying about setting that intention for practicing and making it part of your daily life. Because if we don't do that, and even just a simple act of breathing to calm and relax ourselves and to focus, and move ourselves from any emotionally charged place, especially when we're in conflict. And if those batteries aren't charged in that empathetic way for ourselves and for others, like you said, those judgments begin to seep in. And, one place that, where judgments seep in a lot because of our baggage, and you also talked about one of those strategies on your blueprint, which is these blocks that we have, how do we remove them? But it's very commonly found in our families, and that's the focus of, today's episode is, how do we nurture this culture of empathy in our family, where oftentimes when there's a lot of, unresolved conflict and lots of baggage, that those judgments return and we get easily triggered. So why do you think it's important to practice in the family? And you've had a lot of experience in actually practicing it, so say more about that.
Yeah, the family is like a foundational building block of society. So if we can foster empathy in our families, I think we can really transform society. But for myself, I could start with I think I might have mentioned in the last program a little bit that, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and my family were evangelical, Christian, conservative Republicans. And I was, growing up, I started becoming more of, that generation gap, kind of more the hippie type, perhaps. And, so that created a lot of conflict in the family, a lot of arguments. I kind of felt, I know how things are. I know better than you. And, likewise, they kind of felt the same way. We had a lot of arguments and, a lot of dissension, a lot of conflict in the family. So those kind of, situations happen in families all over. And it's really good to have some way to resolve those conflicts. And for me, it happened by just learning about empathy and then, setting that intention that I want to learn more about empathy. I want to foster empathy in my life. And now in the last, years, I've really done that with my family that, I don't argue with them. I try to hear what it is that they have to say and try to hear what they're saying, but also kind of hear more deeply, like what's behind what they're saying, and really try to empathize with them and just be there and really try to work towards that sense of connection and that culture of empathy within the family.
By really, hearing deeply and just being really present with them in this empathetic way, do you find that it's returned for you?
That's kind of that empathy battery kind of a situation that if you have empathy and you're empathizing with people in your family and then they're not kind of like empathizing back, it's like slowly that empathy battery kind of goes, gets, lower and lower and lower, and you have less of that spaciousness and that space to hear, others in the family. So that's a hard, that's one of the difficulties. If you're really in a family where there's a lack of empathy and you're trying to turn it around and bring more empathy in it, that you really need to have your own, and the family is not like supportive. And mine was, not too supportive for them. I'm saying, well, let's foster more empathy. This is my extended family, mother, father, sister, brother, and their spouses. And they're saying, this sounds a little strange to us. I don't know about this. And it's like, and they're glad to talk and they're glad for me to empathize and they're not really kind of hearing me back. You know what I mean? So, and it was like, and that was kind of like the underlying dynamic within my family was I just didn't feel heard either, within the family. So, if I don't feel heard, I start getting kind of aggravated and, and start wanting to be heard, raising my voice and, just saying something to kind of get their attention. But what I found is that by doing these empathy circles that we talked about previously that I've been doing a couple of these circles a week, and it's all about empathic listening. We do the whole, almost 2 hours of just empathy exercises, empathic listening. And so I keep getting, it's almost like a charging station. I go into the empathy circle and I'm getting my empathy battery charged, and I'm learning the skills. I'm learning the empathic listening. It's kind of like sinking deeper and deeper into my body, into my neural networks, into my brain. And then I find that I have more of that charge to bring into the family. And I'm able to kind of just keep empathizing. I keep saying, yeah, let's do the empathy. And then I can see they're watching me. What is he doing? What's he up to? They're kind of skeptical, but I just keep bringing it up, keep empathizing. And so I think it's kind of that persistence and having that support as well. If you're in a difficult situation where you're wanting to bring empathy in your families, there's a lot of families who it's like, yeah, this is great. Let's do it right off the bat.
So we're going to talk in just a moment about these you actually use a restorative empathy circle with your extended family. I want to talk a little bit about that, but before we do, what I heard you say is that, oftentimes you will use your empathic, reflective listening deeper in the family. They've kind of questioned, what are you doing? What's he after? Is there some ulterior motive? All these things that go in your mind about questioning it. But I'm also hearing you say that, if even though you are charging up their battery by listening and being empathetic to them, and they might not be returning it, what I'm hearing you say is you don't necessarily have to charge your empathic battery with the family that you need it the most, that you can do it from outside of that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, if you have a community, you need a community and network with a community of others who are wanting to foster empathy so that you have that background support. And that can it's larger. It's charging it. We're using kind of a metaphor of charging your empathy battery, but it's really about creating a supportive environment. If we're creating a culture of empathy, we need a starting point, and you have to find it somewhere and then slowly build from there. And that's what I did. And I have a story of actually how that really kind of, I would say, paid off.
Right. So talk a little bit about that, and if you can clarify, because we talk about empathy circles, on these episodes, but there are also specific types of empathy circles, and you're talking about restorative empathy circles. So talk a little bit about what that is and how did that help your family.
Okay, well, I'll start with, I was doing these empathy circles online and in person, just where we come together and we talk about how can we foster empathy, and we just practice empathic listening between all of us in the circle. And there's small circles of about 4 to 5 people. Now, last Christmas in our family, we had a family get-together, and it was Christmas night, and a conflict, a fight actually broke out in the family. And I've been, asking the family, let's do empathy circles and all that, and they've been saying, well, we're not really interested. It's a little too strange for us. So what happened is this conflict started between my mother and my sister-in-law, and it was turning out to be a bit of a knockdown, drag-out kind of, a conflict. And it looked like the whole evening was just going to blow up, and, somebody was going to go home and angry and, not talking to each other. And, I was there. We're in the living room, and, family members were here and there, and, my nephews and nieces were running around, and so this fight was starting. Everybody's kind of like all worried about it, and I got really worried too. I mean, I could feel, when a fight or a conflict like that kind of starts, you feel that icicle, that coldness kind of going into you. You're like, oh no, there's this fight. Do I jump in and start helping one person or the other or whatever? And, I said, no, I'm here for empathy. I'm here to empathize with both, everybody in the family, and to get them to create a culture of empathy together. So in this conflict, and, there was like pointing of fingers and, don't talk to me like that. And, just this whole drama going on. And I just started empathizing first with my sister-in-law. I said, well, I'm hearing you say this. Am I hearing you correctly? And she said, no, it's not quite it. This is what I'm saying. I said, okay, I'm hearing you say this. Am I hearing you? And correctly? She says, yeah, that's right. I said, is there more? And she'd say, no, you got it. Then I'd go over to my mother and empathize with her and kind of just reflect what I was hearing her say until she felt heard. And then I went back, to my sister-in-law. And to begin with, it was it was terrifying to go into that situation. But I could feel that even though I was fearful and had that anxiety and that, to kind of the core of my body, that I also had that empathic resilience, or that my empathy battery had been charged from all this practice, with having done this empathic listening and had this support in the circles. So for almost 15, 20 minutes, I just went back and forth, just empathizing with both the sides, each side, and then going to the other. And then, the tension started coming down. People were starting to feel heard. The anxiety was a little less between everyone. I said, now would you be willing to reflect back, talk to each other, and reflect back what you're hearing the other person say, and then let the person fully speak about what they want to say, and then it will be your turn to share, and you can speak about anything you want. So they kind of grudgingly said, "Oh, okay, we'll do this," and then. Then we started doing that, and they were struggling, and I would, help a little bit here, saying I didn't quite hear, that you were fully heard there, or someone would say something, and the other person would want to respond, right away, and I'd say, no, they haven't quite been heard yet, and so I just kind of kept that dialogue going, and then the whole family gathered around, and it turned into a whole big family empathy circle. And
wow.
Then, it was like my father got into it, and he was talking, and, so everybody was getting into the empathic listening. It was my partner, my brother, my father, my mother, sister-in-law, and the kids were running around there too. And then it was this whole family empathy circle, one person talking, sharing. And then it turned out that my sister-in-law feels that, she's never been really accepted as part of the family. So that's kind of like one of the problems. Mm-hmm. And that, that really came out. And then, my father, who's went through World War II, went through really, terrible things, has been kind of a closed off kind of a person. And he really opened up, said, just shared how much he cared for her and loved her and how accepted, she was in the family. And, they both got up and, big hugs, between them. And then we just kept the dialogue going, and it was like, kind of like I'm doing now. It takes a while to tell the whole story, but it took a while to work through. There was like about an hour and a half of this, back and forth, people talking. And then finally there was kind of a sense of connection with, with my mother and sister-in-law, and, big hugs. And then they're sitting over on the sofa, cuddled up next to each other, holding each other's hands. And, I felt, yay! It was like super success. So this was, this was having the intention of wanting to foster empathy. Nobody wanted to really do it. But then in the moment, having your empathy battery charged and being able to step into the moment of crisis and be there with an empathic presence, that it really opened the whole door to the whole family kind of being, and there's a whole series of stories that happened after that. But it's like that event like opened the door, like, hey, this is pretty good. This felt pretty good. This was pretty safe, So it's kind of like opened the whole door of the family willing to do empathy circles now, and actually doing what you were talking about, the restorative empathy circles.
And the restorative meaning that it helped, just the fact of doing it helped restore their faith and connection and caring for each other, or is there some other?
Well, there's the restorative, the empathy circles that we've developed is just, small group discussions, and they're in non-conflictual situations. It's just the intention is how do we build a culture of empathy together? And then with that basic framework, we created the restorative empathy circles, which is kind of an expanded circle process for dealing with specific conflicts. But they work very much along the lines of what I just mentioned that happened on the spur of the moment, but they're more formalized. So it turned out that my sister and sister-in-law have been having conflict for 8 years. Even before, they got married, they've been having conflict. And then I offered to do a restorative empathy circle with them. Say, okay, you've been having these conflicts. Would you like to do a formal process where we work through this conflict? And we talked about it before, and they were, well, we don't want to do that. I don't trust this and all that. But having seen how this worked, it was like, okay, we'll do it. And
that's
then
one of those open doors.
Exactly. It opened the door to actually doing a more formalized restorative empathy circle process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love your story, and I love how real it is in the sense that, I can imagine lots of families out there who might even be listening to this and like, there's no way my family would ever do this, dealing with the same blocks, the same resistance, the same, this kumbaya, this is not our style, all of those things, that come into play, when doing that. And I, applaud you for your risk, for stepping in the moment, for saying, here's an opportunity. I am fully charged. I'm resilient. I can do this. I can help them. And obviously, after an hour and a half, this is not some quick fix. This is, really, truly being in the moment, listening deeply and being present with them that really turn things around, not only in the relationships, but also your ability to help them open those doors. And like you said, you set that intention, which is what you said was one of the more important strategies that you like. Before we go on, because I want to talk a little bit about how do we encourage others who are listening to do something like that in their own family. And so, listeners, you are tuned in to the Texas Conflict Coach blog talk radio program. And Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy have been talking about how do we do this in our families, the families being a foundational block to get started. If the intention is to build a culture in our society globally, in our workplaces, in our families, where do we begin? And one place is to begin there. So where, when families are listening to this and they're like, man, we could really use Edwin in our home. We don't always need an Edwin in our home. We need someone who has fully charged empathic. What do they do to get started to create this family empathy circle? And how do they deal with the resistance that their family might have, just like your family did?
I think it's the same thing I was basically saying is, one, you have the intention to want to do it, and then the question is, why do you have that? Why do we have the intention? And what is the underlying kind of motivation for that intention? And, neuroscientists, as well as just from experience, say that when we're heard and empathized with, that the pleasure centers of our brain light up. So I see that as kind of like a foundational kind of a motivation for having that intention, that things just feel better, life feels better. We can create families where there's more caring, more concern, more support, more love in the family. So I think that, wanting that environment is really, for me, the intention behind it. Those are the underlying feelings that, create that intention for me. So, one thing for listeners is to, look at what is your intention? What is it that you're wanting? And what is that intention? And then it's like, how do you go about starting to build that culture of empathy in the family? And, it depends on the family. It might be just suggesting, hey, let's do an empathy circle. And, on the website, there's all kinds of material on how to set that up. But if it's a resistance, like you're talking about, then it's really good to just start in an empathy circle with some others who are wanting to do it so that you have that background support. And so kind of build it step by step. And so when you have the intention, you start looking for the opportunities. And as the opportunities kind of reveal themselves, then you kind of I just took advantage of that opportunity, that conflict. To that opening, and it's just like this whole door just opened in the family. And I think that experience is actually totally transformational, for our family, because in our family, the way we always dealt with conflict, push it under the rug, kind of ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And this has really kind of given us the process, an approach for actually working through the conflict. And well, your question was really about how do we kind of start doing it, but it's really get together with others and just start doing empathy circles or, empathic listening, learning how to do it, and get that support, and then look for the opportunities. And we're looking to create processes and, training videos and material and so forth as we can to start supporting people in this quest.
Well, and that was a big thing that you emphasized when you talked about this opportunity that presented itself during the holiday, is that you had already, been practicing leading these empathy circles already. You have a very strong support community, so you've already, have a strong skill set around empathic listening. Because what I would hate to see is listeners say, I can do that, and then they start an empathy circle, and then they're not empathically listening, and then it backfires on them, and then it causes more harm than good. And I can see that excitement for doing it, but then they haven't really set that intention or checked their motivation, and maybe there's an ulterior motive, and then all of a sudden it backfires, and they're like, oh, that didn't work, So what I'm hearing you say is, be clear about your intention. Practice, really know what it means to be empathic as a listener, and we even demonstrated that at the last episode that we did, or maybe it was the first episode. It was one of the episodes we did, and also participate, listeners, in these free empathy circles. You've got, I think, every Saturday you invite people to see that some of these open empathy circles that people can participate in and get an experience of what it's like to be part of an empathy circle. And I noticed also, too, under empathy circles that you have documents, as you made, working pages, like an outline, how do you develop, like a user guide for circles and things of that nature. So, again, not to underestimate that this is the largest website on nurturing and fostering empathy. There's truly a tremendous resource here on this website at cultureofempathy.com. I love that story, and I'm like, I think sometimes, when I think about my own family, and our family is really, divided in so many ways, and, and also geographically dispersed as well. Not that you can't do empathy circles by phone or Google Hangout or Skype, so you don't have to be necessarily in the same room. You do empathy circles with people from all over the world, as I understand it. So don't, listeners, be discouraged that we're not in the same location. I think you can still easily do those by, the technology that we have. But even thinking about my own family, we could very much use empathy circles, with my sisters, for example. There's lots of opportunities, but I think part of it is taking steps, baby steps, in setting that up, because I could definitely see my family being very resistant to, like, what is this? And, oh, are you trying to, I've heard all kinds, as a conflict management coach and mediator, I've heard it all there. Oh, are you trying to psychologize me? Are you trying to analyze? Are you trying to this? Are you trying to that? Are you trying to mediate me? Those kinds of things, and then they get upset. So then they question the motive, I'm trying to do something to them. And I think part of what you're trying to say is this is something we're doing with each other with the intention of, building that empathy and having them be heard and understood no matter what. And so whether I could ever receive that may or may not happen. So I would need to make sure my support empathy circles were in place, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and
also in terms of, it's also the intention, like the empathy circle is something we're trying to do in the family, which is we set the intention is, we have caring, we have love, we have support in the family, we have empathy already, and we get together in the empathy circle, and the question is how can we create more of it? So we start just talking and dialoguing about that. So it's not like, it's every time we get together in a circle, it's about a conflict, that it's about working together to create even more empathy and building on what we already have.
I like that very much. Right. Hopefully it's not just a one-time thing. It's something that is, built within the family, since we're talking about families. But it's not just families. There's so many applications, as you talk about, as you, support, encourage this global, building this global culture of empathy within our society, within our workplaces, within our communities, within our neighborhoods, wherever those can be built. And I love the idea of doing that. And I kind of off topic, or maybe it's not off topic, but I remember you and I talked about your dream. You remember the dream that you have of having a super empathic nanny reality show? Tell us about your dream about that.
Yeah, well, I'm looking, with that intention of how do we foster empathy. So I'm really looking at how can we do that in the family. What's the best way to kind of get the word out there? And there's all these reality shows, and they're all about, competition, about demeaning, about put downs. There's like Jerry Springer or whatever type shows where it's about conflict and stoking conflict and just all this kind of stuff, and it's just so, it's just so destructive to the human spirit. And there's a program out there, Super Nanny, that I kind of see as a model, but it would be Super Empathy Nanny. I'm still looking for the title, where someone who has the resilience can go into a family that's in conflict and really hear what the conflict is, just as I was doing in my family. And then you would hear and see the conflict, and then as I'm not quite sure if the title would be Super Nanny, let's say for now, that you would have that support, that each person in the family would be heard for what's going on with them. They would receive, be heard deeply to the full extent that they want to be heard about whatever they're seeing as the conflict in the family. Then we would bring all the family members together into a restorative empathy circle and have that mediator who would be there to kind of hold the space and keep the empathic dialogue going, would help set up a post plan, like what are we going to do when usually the conflict comes to an end. There's a connection created, and then you want some sort of an empathic action plan. And then you do some follicles, and then setting up a family empathy circle going forward so that the family meets once a week and they're having a chance to have a family, dialogue where everyone is heard fully about whatever is up for them or how they can work together to foster empathy in the family. What things can we do? And to have that to be a show, to kind of be a model showcase, was kind of just a dream that I had as a way of getting the word out there to the popular culture.
Yeah, that would be fun because the reality shows are just all over the place. And in fact, the Super Nanny, the one from Britain, she now has a new reality show about being the Super Nanny, but it's called SOS. She's going in where they're in high conflict and how is she helping to save them. So I haven't actually seen one of the new episodes yet, but I'd be curious to see what kind of empathy she's bringing in on these, kind of crisis cases in the family. But yeah, that I love that. Why can't we show more of those types of reality shows versus all the competition and meaning competition in a very conflictual way? So I love that dream, and who knows, maybe Hollywood will come calling.
Maybe someone will be hearing that on this show, and say, yeah, I like to support that. Let's put it together. Let's put together a pilot, and we can work on that together, Patty.
And you're already in California, so that you're already geographically located right there in Berkeley area, I believe it is.
Yeah,
so.
Bay Area. Uh-huh.
So, Edwin, we've been giving a call to action to folks as we start to close our show. We have a few minutes left. And what would be a new call to action to ending this third episode of our series that you would like listeners to take?
It would be doing empathic listening with someone in your family is to actually say, you can even introduce it, saying, I'm just practicing my empathic listening. Would it be okay if I just try it out? It might sound a little strange, but I'm really trying to practice. Would you be willing? Would that be okay? And actually try it out. You could always check the website, the cultureofempathy.com website, and watch a couple of the empathy circles. There's about 80 of them that have been recorded. So you can really see how it's done, and then actually try it out, test it out, and see how it goes, and maybe even, forewarn your family member, or it can be a friend too, but the idea would be a family member.
Okay. Oh, I love that. A very simple action and yet powerful, and gives that opportunity to practice. So I love that. So listeners, take the plunge and start practicing. Remember, set your intention and then practice. And again, many, many videos so that you can see what that looks like. So we know that people can find you at cultureofempathy.com. You have your empathy open, kind of drop-in empathy circles on Saturday mornings that start at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and go to 11, so that's a couple of hours. Are there any other special circles or events that are coming up you want people to know about right now?
I think those empathy circles are the main projects right now. We're also starting a workshop, developing a workshop process, which we just started doing here in the Bay Area. We're going to be starting to do those pretty soon, too.
Okay. All right. So you'll be announcing that, I'm sure, on your website. So if people are interested in that, to be kind of looking for that on your website. And now next week, listeners, we are going to continue our series. It will be the last episode. And it's building a culture of empathy in the business world and beyond. And in addition to Edwin and I speaking, we'll be having our special guest, Keiko, and her last name, is it spelled Kroenke?
Kroenke, that's how I pronounce it.
Okay, so we'll get clarification on that. But Keiko Kroenke will be joining Edwin and I. Will be doing it as a video, so you'll be able to see the video interaction with that. Edwin, what final message do you want to leave with listeners?
Join the empathy movement and light up the pleasure centers of your brain.
Awesome. I love it. Edwin, have a good night. Thank you, listeners, for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.